There you are. There you are, Gina. She says, Ezekiel 18:24 makes this argument confusing. And I agree. It can be. It can be. But remember, and this is what we do over here. We want to, remember I said I have a literal, grammatical, historical hermeneutic. So the literal part is easy to understand. That means that we read it literally until we can't, until there's no reason for us to read it literally. And it's impossible. Okay? So when he says that he spoke with God face to face, well, it's not literally because God didn't literally have a face, but we understand the meaning even in a literal context. That's just human beings, because there's no society ever in the history of mankind that ever had a non-literal way of speaking, ever. But the Bible does. That's what I mean by literal. That's the way you read. Grammatical, taking what the words say, the tenses, the cases, the declensions, all that stuff like that. But then the historical portion, there is a chronology to what's being stated. And so in Ezekiel, he's speaking of Israel, but he's also going to speak about what he's going to do with the world as well. But this is mainly regarding Israel. But notice what he says. He says in verse 24 of chapter 18 of Ezekiel, he says, but when a righteous man turns away from his righteousness, commits iniquity, and does according to all the abominations that a wicked man does, will he live? Well, the obvious answer is going to be no. He cannot live. No, he's in trouble. You're out of here, bucko. As Richie Cunningham would say, bucko, you're out of here. If you were once righteous, excuse me, and as he says, turns away from his righteousness, commits iniquity, well then, does according to all the abomination that a wicked man does, will he live? You used to be righteous, you turn away, start doing all this other stuff. No. Well, the problem with, and so if we look at who he's speaking of, who is he speaking of? Verse 25, yet you say the way of the Lord is not right. Hear now, O house of Israel, is my way not right? Is it not your ways that are not right? So he's speaking collectively of Israel. But now someone individually this applies to as well. But now someone individually this applies to as well. You're not living right. You were in right standing. Now, go back to verse 24. He says, turns away from his righteousness. If a person is righteous under the Old Testament, under the Old Covenant, question, what made a person righteous in the first place under the Old Covenant? Does anyone know? What made a person righteous? Well, what made them righteous was that their sins were atoned for through these offerings, the Day of Atonement, principally. And so they could be in right standing. But you're not in right standing forever because this was a yearly thing, annually. And so therefore you had to keep doing it and keep doing it. So it's possible to be in right standing, go out and commit iniquity, live how you want to live, because what you didn't have in you was the Holy Spirit in your heart. Live how you want to live. Will you still be in right standing? No. Could you get back in right standing? Sure. Could you get back in right standing and then turn around and leave it? Yes, you could.